morning, Dominica. Good morning. It's the Caribbean. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to another special Creole Heartbeat program. Donc, des spéciales bonjour. Tout le monde a tout quoi la Dominique aujourd'hui.
Oui, Franck.
C'est vraiment un grand plaisir pour nous là encore. Nous sommes trois grands invités avec Jean Messier. Three great Dominicans, and I must say, it's a pleasure to be in the company of such distinguished statesmen and stateswomen. And today we're going to have a very important program where we're going to divulge into the real mass. And today it gives me great pleasure to introduce my co-host, first of all, Anita Boulay. Good morning to you, Saravet.
Morning. Thank you very much, Wadi.
And how are you this morning?
Great.
And it's a pleasure to actually invite our guests. I'm not sure if you can see them on the other side, but Dr. Lennox Honeychurch, Dominica's historian par excellence, truly one of Dominica's great Dominicans, and has done exemplary work for Dominica and has left a major trail for any other historian to actually follow from Dominica. And what a gentleman, what a human being. And Ray Lawrence, you talk about culture, you talk about Creole. That's Raymond Lawrence, and it gives us great pleasure to actually divulge into our subject, Anita. So I'll allow you to do the introductions.
Yes.
As we say, first of all, good morning to...
Good morning to listeners, and I hope you all can join us with some comments. We're throwing it out there because we need to ask some important questions. What do we mean by the real mass? Is it the traditional aspect of our mass? If it isn't the traditional aspect of our mass, what is it? Why are we calling it the real mass? If it is the traditional aspects of our mass, we need to determine a number of things. What traditional aspects of our mass we can promote or support to make our carnival competitive and to bring more Dominicans and new visitors to our shows for carnival. How can we include these aspects along with the modern mass? Is it only the modern mass that we want? If so, can we compete with Trinidad and the rest of the Caribbean? From all reports, the younger population loves the fetes around Carnival. And believe me, we've been there, we've done that. But there are some serious consequences of fetes going on so late on Monday morning, as well as the extended hours of Juve. Because most times, by the time Juve is over, you have revelers straggling back home to eat, sober up, and take a rest. They don't wake up until the afternoon, at which time they begin trickling down to their bands. The bands come out extremely late. As a result, we have empty streets, with music coming from some bars, the media trying to find someone to interview or some activity to cover, or just standing on the sidewalk as the cameras cover the empty roads with one or two people straggling by. I remember the days, I don't know if you remember them, when the verandas and sidewalks were covered with onlookers. The carnival is losing its audience, and can we blame them? Most of the time, there's nothing going on. As a result, person who would normally go to town to watch the parade stay home and watch the TV coverage, and if it grabs them, they will go to town. Okay? So we need to ask ourselves some serious questions. What are our carnival visitors looking for? We think we know what they're looking for. They're looking for new experiences and a good time. Okay? We can give them that. The new experiences, our traditional mass can be revitalized. A good time, especially for the returning young generation and other visitors. There are lots of fetes and parties 24/7, and they have the modern mass bands. So we need to look at, if we're calling it the real mass, how can we incorporate the real mass with the party mass? And where do we go from here?
And that's why we have invited, like we said, two of the greatest Dominicans ever to assist us to understand what we used to have, where we are, and if we need to be going somewhere where we can be competitive, we understand the history, the genesis, the metamorphosis, the values of what we once had. And are we diluting those values? What should we do to get a good balance? Let's say good morning to Dr. Honeychurch and Ray Lawrence. Good morning to you guys.
Yeah.
Good morning, Wadix. Howdy.
Morning.
Bonjour,
Wadix.
bonjour, Ray.
Bonjour.
How is it at Keck?
Yeah, not bad.
And Doctor, once again, it's a pleasure. I know you. It's a special sacrifice for you, but it's always a pleasure to invite you to Creole Heartbeat. I mean, a wealth of knowledge. I call it an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Yeah,
I remember the days of encyclopedia and before the advent of social media.
Right.
But what do we mean by the real mass, Ray and Dr. Honeychurch? In your opinion, you have been there from over almost
Yep.
50 years of actually being part of it. What do we mean or what do we understand when we say the real mass?
I
Well,
would
you can.
kind of start off, Wadix, if you don't mind, with the real mass, an expression of our carnival in Dominica, and something that reflects the roots and the heritage and the culture of Dominica. Because there are so many carnivals all over the world. What it is about Dominica's carnival that makes it sort of unique, makes it different? Does it capture characteristics and expressions and historical significance and growth out of the roots of Dominica's experience? So then, if all the countries in a way have that kind of approach, you'll find each carnival is unique because it is coming out of their particular unique history. The same goes for Dominica, that we're not just copying what other people are doing, but we are in fact building on what we have celebrated, nurtured, developed for many, many years in Dominica. And Dominica has had a very long history of a very successful, vibrant, colorful, spectacular carnival for many, many years, especially when we had, before we made that sort of change from, the Monday, Tuesday, that kind of change. But for now, we just have to look and see how things can be improved. Yes, the carnival and certain elements and aspects of the carnival are successful, are bright and beautiful, and people enjoy certain aspects. But the question we have to ask after every carnival is there room for improvement? Is a every year assessment, and we have to take an honest look at the evaluation and assessment of the carnival and see what worked well and what didn't work so well. And then what worked well, you build on it, and what didn't work so well, you try to address those weaknesses.
Yes, Dr. Honeychurch?
Yeah, well, of course, the thing is to look at the different stages that Carnival has come through. If we go back 100 years to 1925, we can then see from that, if we take it from that time to now, it's a tidy 100 years, you will see how things evolve and change. Let us put it very briefly. Well, if we go back to 1925, you're getting the Chanté Mass. And that was basically created on the streets or in the backyards, the laku of places like Lodbor, Pottersville, and down in Newtown, and then even as far as Point Michel, coming up with their Solomon Wule, Sinu Mona Mona Nisala and all that in 1922. So the thing is that you had those traditional carnivals, of course heavily masked, because in those days the upper class did not want to be seen to be wulaying too much in the streets and all that. And many of the songs were basically making fun of people who were actually there, sitting in the verandas or wherever. So you didn't want the people to see you singing against them. So there was all of this business to do with the mask. And of course, the further back we go, the more we have those African roots being represented, because Carnival itself was a merger of African ceremony and the European traditions, particularly the French. Because actually one of the big things and the origin of the Chanté Mass was that in places like Ghana and Senegal and now, when somebody did something outrageous or injured somebody, embarrassed them, you would essentially have people coming around in the marketplace singing about these people. In fact, using shame to make them stop doing what they're doing. And then, of course, as it came across into the Americas, well, Dominica in particular, during slavery, in the slavery period, you had the African ceremonies then being adapted to the European religious celebrations, particularly the 2 days before Lent. So all of these mergers then created this multifaceted kind of a culture. So let's go to the 20s, and you have your Shanty Mass, your Passios, and so singing through the streets, and being created in the days before the carnival, or even on the carnival day. I mean, we have this iconic song, Adieu William O. I mean, Adieu William O was created in 1927 between the Roseau Bridge and Constitution Hill, because they came afternoon from taking their drink and their lunch down in Pottersville, and as they came across, they saw the chief of police and all his men up on top Constitution Hill, what was then called Monfadel, and they began singing. The man's name, the chief of police, was William Layton, and so they said, nou ke bon pou. Adieu William O, se moute nou ka moute pou la mort. Desan nou ka desan pou la vie. Adieu William O, se moute nou ka moute pou la mort. And the drums that went with it. And so you had spontaneous song, you know. And then, of course, from the 1950s, we were beginning to follow Trinidad far more, because Trinidad was turning carnival into a sort of national cultural, under Eric Williams, a national cultural event. And the management of the carnival was being organized by, in the 1950s, what was called the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and the shows and the Queen shows and the costumes and all of that was changing. So it's like what I put once in some publication of mine, that the Shanty Mass died at the steps of the Carib Cinema, because the Carib Cinema was where you had your first calypso shows, where you had to be judged to be accepted as a calypso king, or even your particular carnival song that you were singing. And then the people who had used to be creating the Shanty Mass, they kind of dwindled. Because you had to win a competition, you had to be recognized to be able to have your song as on the road. So you see the changes happen, and gradually, like I remember in 1971, right, not necessarily here because the radio station, this one, hadn't been kind of set up yet, but in early 71 over in the back of the library where Wibbs was, there was great concern in 1971 because the carnival had been so bad. It had not had the spirit. A lot of things had fallen by the wayside. And I remember that there was this great concern. So discussions as to what could be done and whatever. So there are these changes that take place, and also technological changes in the instruments. So by the 50s, you were getting the steel pan, which was being brought up from the influence from Trinidad. Before that, it had been essentially lapo, cabuit, and trumpet, and that kind of thing. And now, of course, with the high-tech stuff on a truck with bouillon and all that, it moves into a totally different phase. So just as I said the Shanty Mass died at the steps of the Carib Cinema, you can say that the Calypso died underneath the big hi-fi systems of the bouillon, because we spend a lot on giving prizes and all that for the Calypso shows. But when you really judge on the street, how many of those Calypso winners, their songs are on the street? It's now moved into bouillon, and bouillon is a completely new type and pattern of carnival. So there's this dilemma. How do you hold on to those great things of the past and yet you accept that there's a younger generation now that wants to move on to another type of song, another type of action, because the whole dance pattern has changed. I mean, even in the steel band days, you had lines of people going down the streets, brand new shoe, mommy, say you shouldn't use tennis shoe tongue. Everybody's in a row going down singing. But now you've moved into another technology, and that determines how the bands move as well, So it's a very interesting topic, but let us look around the Caribbean and we'll see some islands that really have been able to blend both. And one of them that I focus on a lot is Grenada. Yes, Grenada has their stuff, but they have been able to maintain their jab, and their villages have particular costume bands and a particular music that comes out with it and merges together with the tradition and the more up to date. Yeah. So it's a matter of how do you balance the both,
This is DBS Radio Special Creole Heartbeat program. We have Dr. Lennox Church, Raymond Lawrence, Anita Booley. We are discussing the real mass. Anita, you could come in here also. What is real
about
the mass? Ray.
Yeah,
What
well,
is real?
and Lennox has alluded to it. The other aspect about Carnival is that it is both modern, creative, and traditional all at the same time. Because if we look at Carnival, even years ago, the 70s, 80s, you have all the modern Carnival bands and costumes and new things people come out with, new ideas and thematic designs and themes and so. And at the same time, you always have the sensei and the lapo cabwit and the cowboys and Indians and social sui, the bois bois, all of that mixed into one big celebration in Dominica. And this is what makes the carnival rich and enjoyable, creative, visually exciting. Because you get in a sense, you're getting a taste of both worlds, the modern, creative, innovative ideas, so that people don't think we must always have only the traditional. No, you're allowing for all the creativity that has been Dominica's Carnival for years. Thunderbirds and all those who used to organize Carnival Corner come up with all these wonderful ideas. Now you have all these modern costume, the depth and texture and historical aspects of the carnival coming through with the sensei and your susra sui and your bois bois. All these traditions have been expressed together with the modern and creative, and that's the whole idea of the beauty of Dominica's carnival. So as we move forward, we have to pay attention and invest in and encourage, continuing both aspects, Wadix, in order for our carnival to remain vibrant, exciting, colorful, and capturing the modern and the creative, and at the same time celebrating the heritage of our country in our mass, in our carnival.
But I was just going to say that, we talk about sensei, we talk about bois bois, still walkers, but there were chunks of time when these were just not on the street. Remember, we had the tragic fire in 1963, and the legislature banned for 30 years. There was no sensei, unless, of course, you went quietly.
In Roseau.
I was just, unless you went down Lally or St. Joe or Granby. Well, Lally, Granby is what I was thinking of. So you had those things on the side, but as far as Roseau and formal mass was concerned, it was not only a matter of the sensei. You wouldn't suppose it was illegal to wear masks, and even grease paint was in the legislation. And then finally in 1993, particularly Mr. Dermot Southwell and others got together and pleaded with the then Prime Minister Eugenia Charles, and it was revived. And certainly it made a big difference. Sensei became the symbol of Dominican Mass. But there was a time for 30 years when it wasn't. And similarly, with the stilt walkers and the bois bois, yes, it existed in the 1920s, 30s, but then it phased out. And all my time in when I grew up in the 60s, there was no wabwa. There was no. You heard old people say about this stilt walkers that used to exist, and then all of a sudden, it reemerged after a period of time when people then got interested in reviving it and stuff. But then we have to subdivide the groups that participate in Carnival, because you have the real mass people who will make the effort to do the senses and to do the other things, and to do the costume bands less and less, because costume bands take a great deal of effort and money. It's not only the money, it's getting everybody together to put them together. And then we went into the feathers and the bikinis and that kind of thing, which was a complete movement away from the traditional mass. So you have certain groups of people who will participate in the old-time real mass. You'll have a certain set of people who will be paying, I don't know what it is now, $400 or more for something to be flown in from Miami. That is
No, man.
All I got
No,
from
man.
was
No,
that
man. 2,500 East.
You see that?
$3,000, man, Dr. Honeychurch.
You see that?
For the, and then I understand. Well, I understood they get some of the raw material, but then they actually built. From
Yes.
speaking to one of the costume builders, they actually built locally, so they get in there.
They get them in
parts,
pieces like prefab.
Yes,
Yes.
and quite a bit of local stuff have been used.
Yeah.
But,
But the point is that, you have these different, the people who
Yeah.
are going to put on the feathers and the whatever are not the days of Thunderbirds and Carnival Corner, where you actually, the glory that was Greece, or the rise and fall of the Roman Empire and all that kind of stuff.
creativity.
And the creativity, nobody's spending time on that, because it's passé. And then there's those who are not going to put on any costume at all.
Yes,
And they're just going to come behind the band.
and there are those who thinks that it is almost better to be without much clothing.
Oh, well, yes.
Without much garment.
Less clothing, the better.
Less clothing,
Yeah.
the better.
Yeah.
But then I'm happy you mentioned Grenada and how they were able to manage and balance the carnival with the jab and the contemporary. I have seen and observed Grenada's carnival, and to my mind, we have more aspects, we have more variety, that we can add more value. But how are we going to balance that value from the contemporary and also the traditional to give it because from what I get in, the traditional and it's the marriage that is really the real mass.
Yes,
But
yes.
the marriage of late, I've been covering Carnival now for almost 2 decades, has been yearly swinging to the contemporary and less of the traditional.
Right.
How are we going to return those days to get a reasonable balance so someone from Europe, someone from Asia coming in can get a true component of the real mass?
Yeah, because the feathers and the bikinis and that kind of thing is in every island.
Yeah.
Barbados, had never had carnival as such until the 1970s. Their revival with crop over and all that.
Yeah.
That's what they are. That's what Trinidad has become.
Rio.
Yeah, Rio. Talk of Rio. That's where you just get the little flimsy bits and pieces hanging on. But certainly, to me, the real mass is those people and groups that decide, all right, we remember what was and what emerged from Dominica. So that is our focus. And then you're going to have these different components. You have the feathers and the bikinis and all that. That's another type of mass. But what I notice with the people who are visiting and taking photographs and putting it out on social media, the pictures that they are publishing for social media is essentially things like sensei,
Yeah.
Traditional.
and other, yes.
And
Absolutely.
even when you see the flyers from, let's say, Discover Dominic Authority,
Yeah.
they are promoting the traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And when you come on the road, is it, and let us face it, because if you're trying to assist and anything can come in there, is it a false sense of promotion that we are advertising and promoting more traditional on our flyers, the various speeches delve into traditional, let's say, oriented, but the experience on the road is almost
not.
90%
Yeah.
contemporary.
Yeah.
I-
Yes, I want to comment there on two things. Like Grenada, government puts in endless money into Grenada's carnival. Okay? We need to look at that aspect of it. Because really and truly, you have sensei groups in hubs like St. Joseph, like in Granby.
Collyho.
Collyho would have band movie. Okay, they don't do much sensei, but they have their band movie. But they will come in for the opening parade, and they bitterly tell you that, they give them money to cover the truck, and people are not working, they have to come to town, and they're not compensated enough for coming to town, but they will come for the opening parade. Okay? But they have their carnivals in their villages.
Yeah.
So on Monday and Tuesday, they prefer to stay in their villages. And that started when parliamentarians were given a subsidy for carnival to promote the carnival in their villages, which is great. But we need to look further than that, because I remember one year we came to Dominica and Alwyn wanted pictures of Sensei because he was doing a Sensei exhibition. And we went to places, stopped in Maho, took pictures, stopped in St. Joseph. That is a tour that can be offered to tourists, okay? But we can't have everything on the same day, okay? Maybe you can go from village to village, okay, and organize it based on population or whatever. But we need to re-look at that whole thing, okay? How can we do this? Okay, how can government support the traditional costumes, the making of traditional costumes? Now, you have young people that don't know about Sensei. We tried a thing last year and it worked, where we did Sensei making for schools. And they had a ball. They enjoyed themselves. So maybe we need to take it. Where are they learning about Sensei? They're not learning it in the schools. Okay? We need to take it to the schools. And if you notice now, school bands are less and less
Diminishing.
every year. They're diminishing slowly but surely in schools that participate, as well as in the numbers that participate at the school. How do we promote that? How can maybe some subventions be given to the school to encourage them to set up a band? Okay? Bring in designers there to help them to, okay, you have an idea. What would you like to see as your costume? Come up with an idea and help them to develop that idea so the schools can have bands to come in for the children's parades. So these things will not happen on their own, because we have to realize in this technological age, our children are more watching their phones and television. Watching what? American programs, okay, and American stars. They know more about the American stars than they know about Dominican national heroes.
That's correct.
Okay, so something needs to be done. I think we need some sessions with the Ministry of Education to find out how we can, integrate those things within the school system.
One of my major concerns is the opening. You see
Yeah.
all various aspects, Ray, and Dr. Honeychurch. You see the Bois Bois, you see the Black Devils, you see Corleone movie, the Good Hope. You see all the various sections. La Bocabit from Mortine, from the Kalinago territory. That's in the opening parade, most times 2-3 weeks before the Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
But to me, the lead up, like it used to be before in the 70s, was very critical. The practice or practice mass was
Yeah.
Practice mass.
practice mass used to build a spirit. I can tell you about Portersville, almost every day for about a month, for two almost 6 weeks. Every day was a practice.
Yeah.
So Laboka would go from street to street,
Yeah.
but would not cross the bridge.
Yeah.
I know Newtown would be similar, but then the climax is Monday and Tuesday.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So why do we have every aspect in the opening, and on Monday and Tuesday when we invite all the tourists,
Yeah.
we don't even have half of what we're promoting on the opening?
Yes. And the thing is, practice mass used to happen from Christmas, eh?
Of course,
From
like in Guadeloupe.
Christmas.
In
and
Guadeloupe,
they
every Sunday
come
after.
down the road
Yes.
and look at how vibrant the Guadeloupe Carnival
Yes,
is
continues,
now.
yes.
But it's because of this practicing, and it brings economic activity to the villages or the communities where the
excitement.
practice mass happens.
Ray and Lennox, I know you want to talk to the practice mass weeks before the actual Monday and Tuesday, and how important it was for the communities, and the spirit was being built.
Well,
Yeah.
yes, not only the spirit, but of course, if you go in the early days of the reason being that you were composing your songs at that time, your basic La Pocabwit Chante Mas songs. So, in fact, in the 1930s, 40s, people would secretly go and sponsor, give bands money to keep their name out of the song. People like C.A. Roll, his bust is on the
hospital.
roundabout there by the hospital, and
Would pay the gangs to keep their
To
name
keep
out.
their name
of
out.
of the roadman songs.
That's right. And of course, the sponsorship would come voluntarily from business people. I mean, one of the key people, and it's interesting that the Phillip family, Cornell and Smokey and these guys are so much involved with Carnival because their grandfather, C.G. Phillip, was the one that sponsored very often a number of these bands, La Pocabwit, and of course, they were also bringing in brass, trumpet and stuff like that. And it was these businessmen who would help sponsor, because in those days government wasn't going to pull money out for Carnival. It wasn't their attitude in that. So, indeed, those early days and the previous building up the spirit. But you see that shift now to the opening of Carnival being weeks or whatever before.
Normally 3 weeks. Or
3
so,
weeks, yeah.
to a month. Yeah.
Before Carnival. That took away, as you have pointed out, from the Monday opening,
And
Tuesday
Monday,
opening, coming in with the Queen contestants and their costumes and all of that. I mean, I remember the parades. Of course, we will all remember too that the big, which is not done at all now, was Sunday afternoon float parade.
Yes.
Now, that is when you'd get all the businesses sponsoring a truck decorated, and it could be advertising their paint or their produce or whatever. And you would have it starting sometimes in the gardens or later on Windsor Park, and then going through the streets, and people would come from all over the island with the queens and so on. So that was the big Sunday, because this concept of promoting the thing weeks in advance didn't exist. It was like Samedi Gua dance on the Saturday.
Was it leading to
Right.
to Ash Wednesday?
You had your big Samedi Gua dance here and there. Then you had the Sunday with the float parade. And then Monday, the big opening on Monday morning. And so it was very, very different.
So what I also want to add, WADIC's budgeting is very critical. I'm not criticizing, and maybe I'm critiquing. So you have a budget for Carnival. I don't know what the budget is now for Carnival, but let's say it's about $1 million or whatever. And then you have, let's suppose, out of the million, you have about maybe 500,000 towards all your shows and all your events, your opening. All of that needs funds. Your bands on the road, assisting costume bands and so. But a large chunk of that has to be invested in the same traditional carnival that we're talking about. I think that is where we are weak. That we not invest, well, I shouldn't say we're not investing sufficiently in the Sense, in the Bois, in the Suswal Sui, with the schools, with the village councils. So let us suppose your plan for the year is this carnival. I'm just putting out. Now, that's what we said. We had 3 Sense bands. Next year carnival, we want to see 10 Sense bands. This year we had 2 school bands. Next year we want to see 10. Every year you're trying to increase. Next year we want to see 10 school bands. This year we had the Carinago and a few community groups, 3 or 4. Next year we want to see 10 community groups coming down. And I want to suggest that we bring them down on a Monday, because WADIC's Monday, Carnival Monday now has become very weak compared to Tuesday. That's another whole issue by itself. That after the Juve, we all know the streets of Roseau are just empty.
Is
for
it
a
because
ve-
Juve is going on too late?
Definitely, I
a
was
very
just
long,
going to
let's
say
suppo-
that.
because you know where I live. I live in Lagon, which is
Oh.
very close to the carnival route. And I grew. That's where I grew up. So I know the carnival route and carnival very, very
Changes.
well, and has changed through the years. Carnival Monday was the biggest celebration.
Yes.
Up to me, Carnival Tuesday was also very
Last
big.
lap,
Both of them
last
were
lap.
very big. But Carnival Monday had the queens and the bands and the sensei,
The
everything mixed up
spectacle.
into, and all the verandas and all the sidewalks and all the streets were filled with people. Roseau was, I grew up in Roseau. Roseau was jam packed on a Monday. Now it is not that way. After the Juve, the streets are empty.
Until about
From
4
10 o'clock in the
Yes.
morning until around 4 in the. So it's a gap. It's a huge gap that has to be filled in. It has to be made spectacular. It has to be made attractive. So a lot of the investments that we would be doing, let's suppose identifying 10 communities to bring 10 sensei groups. We want 10 Lapo Cabwits instead of the 2 that were there last year. We want 10 bands, school bands. We can focus now on the Monday because of that big gap that's there, and then let them come out so that whole big gap on Monday can be filled in, so that we can have a strong Monday presentation and also a strong Tuesday presentation. But it has to be a deliberate, targeted, budgeted. Let us take some significant amount of money. That is what we need, and invest in costumes, in traditional, in Lapo Cabwit, in steel band, in bois bois, all over, not just in 1 or 2 pockets. Even if 2 or 3 communities are doing sensei now, we can encourage those who are not doing sensei to now begin to take up the craft of sensei. And then after a while, you find if every year you're trying to build, who knows, when we get 20 sensei bands after a while, 20 school bands and so on.
One of my major concerns, Ray, is the Lapo Cabwit, because we know during 4 and 6 a.m. is basically dedicated to the traditional aspect. And hopefully it's there's been the maximum 3 Lapo Cabwits.
Maximum of 3, and the crowd's very small.
Yeah, because the thing is, over several years, the crowds at the christen, because they kind of wait on the electronic bands
to
at
come
6 o'clock.
out.
But then most of the Lapo Cabwit bands are also having Juve in their various communities.
Yeah.
How do you remedy that in the city, which is the city?
Yeah.
And I have suggested possibly start Juve earlier.
Yeah.
And get some of the bands from the other areas to come down for a while, and then they can go
go
back
back.
to their communities to continue the Juve. But then it would have started earlier, so then you'd get more participation earlier. Then you have another issue where, because of that lull on the Sunday, there are several fetes now have taken over.
And they
know,
don't finish
and the
until
fetes
10 o'clock in the morning.
Well, you would know anything. But those fetes continue right into the carnival season, right into the carnival itself.
Day.
So once again, even during what you have been observing now is during the traditional aspect, which is 4 to 6, the fetes are continuing, Ray, and Dr. Honichich. So most of the patrons are within the fetes. So the streets are empty until they now stop the fetes, and then people would come down to the city.
So Wadik, sorry, continuing on the point I was making was, now that we've seen how this thing has grown, and sometimes it's difficult to, when people starting to get into a habit, it's difficult to get them to change. So then we have to begin to think out of the box, target communities around Dominica, target schools, target community groups, youth groups, and so on, and children's groups in the schools and then we tell them that we want them to come out at 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning. So all of those groups that we're investing in, let the Juve be the Juve, that's how it's been going. But and then you will have, let's suppose you have about 20 or 25 new groups when you've invested, but of course the money has to be there. And you tell them you'd like them to come out to parade between 10 on Monday morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So for the whole year, that is what you're aiming towards. Because you know the Juve will do its thing, you know this Tuesday will have their costume thing, you know the t-shirt will come out at a certain time. So the aim is to fill in that Monday gap so that Monday becomes a huge spectacle. I would also want to suggest that the Queens come out twice. I've made that suggestion before. Long ago, and Lennox would remember, Sunday, the Queens would come out on Sunday parade,
In the evening
and they
wear.
come out on Monday parade.
Their costume.
The Queens would come out twice. I have been saying that for many years. It's a long time we've lost that. So on Sunday, they come out in their evening wear. That was before Carnival Sunday. And on Monday, they come out in their costumes. Right now, we only have them coming out on a Tuesday morning in their costumes. And the whole idea was a lot of the young children were not of age to go out at night to the Queen shows and Calypso shows.
Yes.
They didn't see the Queens. They didn't see the evening wear. They didn't see costume. I myself, I remember, I wasn't allowed to go at a certain age, 8, 9. You can, your bigger sister and brother that can go. So you on Sunday afternoon now, you can actually see, as a child, you can see the evening wear. You can see the. So now that we only have them coming out once, why don't we? And that same Monday injection we're talking about, revitalization of Carnival Monday. Why don't we say that the Queens can also come out on a Monday morning in the evening wear? Let them come out in the costume on the Tuesday as they are accustomed of doing. But why not on a Monday in their evening wear? So we are reviving the 2 appearances of the Queens, the winners, the runners-up, the winners of the teen, the winners of the princess. I'm talking about Monday morning in evening wear, on floats, on vans, with all the groups that we have invested in to come out so that we can revitalize and revive.
So you're not
Carnival
considering
Monday.
revitalizing Sunday afternoon?
Well,
Because-
well, 2 things.
Yeah.
I want to just interject the dwindling support for the Queen shows.
Yes,
That's one.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
If we imagine the numbers, and not only that, what my main concern is how you manage those fetes around national events.
Yeah.
Queen show I know Queen show from the time I was born as a major aspect.
Yeah.
At one point in time, I'm not sure if people or you will remember, Queen show was even bigger than Calypso show.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
the early, I mean, Queen show was the show, and more resources went to the Queen show. Now the numbers are dwindling. We have to face it. That's one. Sponsorship are also scarce.
Yep.
Because I notice sometimes even DFC have to come on board and sponsor some of the Queens.
Yeah.
So one, the patronage is not as before. 2, the sponsorship. And the most critical thing, there are events
The same time.
private events. How can you give private events permission? Is there a regulatory body
There is you're supposed to get a permit
from the
but
council,
that-
from the national council? Or from
no,
who?
I think it's a permit from the police.
From the police.
Yes.
But then because you have national events,
Yeah.
and this this event sometimes in the same proximity,
Yeah.
by the way, in the same proximity, the city, that these events are ongoing the same night as the Queen show.
Show.
And it's supposed to, it will always take over from the Queen
Yeah.
show. Okay, that is one. Now, very importantly, in terms of the Lapo Cabaret, in Guadeloupe and Martinique, they don't start around carnival time. They start to assemble way during the
Months
summer. They start to
before.
get themselves together. They
Yeah.
need their drums, fix their drums. So it's not a system when you talk about carnival like us. We wait until Independence and Christmas to start talking about carnival.
Yeah.
In the French, no. And very critically, we just witnessed it a few months ago. Myself, Brahim, Dr. Dublin, we were in Guadeloupe, in Martinique, for a special event, and there were children
Yeah.
playing Lapo Cabaret, playing brass, the whole works, the ting-a-ling-a-ling ring.
Yeah.
And we're talking about from 5 to 14
Yeah.
children. That day now was dedicated especially for children mass, where children and schools all over Martinique played mass. In Fort-de-France, they were on the streets of Fort-de-France.
Yeah, I was following that online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, we need to encourage steel bands in the schools and Lapo Cabarets in the schools. Now, a Lapo Cabaret is not an expensive thing. You have to get the drums. Okay, yes, they do cost a few $100s, but I think an effort can be made for each school to get a sponsor, to get instruments for a Lapo Cabaret, and to get instruments for a steel band. So they each have a steel band and a
And that's where the
lapocap.
budget too comes in.
Yes,
Budget,
that's
that's
where
why-
budget
that's a
comes
it's a
in.
real
That's
sub-
where
sub-
I-
budget come in.
I can see the teachers all around Dominica listening to this now, shaking their head and saying,
Who
No,
got
but
that
then-
teaching?
you're
no, but
throwing
then
it at
they
the school
are.
again?
No, but then that is where
Well-
that is where
No.
the cultural division and the national, because I know that what's this guy, one of the cultural officers, went around Dominica teaching children accordion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it can be done.
It can be done.
And one of the things you possibly could do, if you ask the business places December for February, they may
Forget
not
it.
have.
Yeah.
But if you have a year plan, and every month they put a particular fund aside, a special, some funds aside, it will eventually become something at the end of, let's say, 10 months.
Yeah.
So they can sort of adopt a school, adopt a group. But then everything seems to be happening. Okay, we go from jazz festival, summer, then Creole festival. We spend most of our money.
National
Then we are
Day.
broke for Christmas.
Yeah.
We are broke for Carnival.
Yeah, but and then of course you see when we blithely sit here and talk about businesses,
Yeah.
when we're talking about the 60s and 70s and so, there were so many more major business places. You had, Geest Industries and all of the other shipping companies and whatever. A lot of that has dwindled. Elrose and Company, for instance, with the lime juice production, they would be sponsoring floats and all these things were happening.
Bello and
Yes.
Yes.
call,
AC
DCP,
Shillingford,
Yeah.
ACP, also
That's right.
we had several car companies.
Yeah.
And
I
if
remember Toyota used to have a major float.
Right. And if, as you raised AC
Vauxhall.
Shillingford, like AC Shillingford, they would be the agents for some particular type of beer or milk or whatever, and they'd get all these beautiful girls in their little flimsy outfits on the truck waving the products.
Yeah.
But you see, things change, social patterns move on, and that's the difficult part. So yeah, you can make a great effort in all the things that, for instance, Anita has brought up and Raymond, but you have to take into account that certain things have irrevocably changed, and you have to adapt to that. And the circulation of money, it's all very well to say, oh yes, let's throw money at this and throw money at that, but the availability of extra funds to be able to do these things, you have to be a bit realistic about it,
But before, they would get, say, Dutch Lady to sponsor. It's not being sponsored by the Dominican company. It's sponsored by the brand overseas.
Yes.
So we need to get our business people to get into that mindset where we need help. Our carnival needs help. Can we look at one of your
products.
head offices that have this product that is doing well in Dominica to invest, say, 5,000 US into Carnival? That's how we raise money. Okay, because as Lennox rightly said, businesses are going through the crunch. Okay, but then we're not asking them specifically for the money. We're asking them to seek the money from the people who they are selling products for.
I know I am also being called and targeted as old school. But I am concerned about the independence ray, like we know, was a period where we focus on Dominica.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We focus on Dominica. It was our independence time. Then we brought in the World Creole Music Festival, which was supposed to amplify the independence, because we had Kadar Slipso and we later had Bouillon. We have seen a total departure of that, and all kind of fetes.
Yeah.
Is
Fets
now
have taken
crowding,
over.
is now taking over the independence and the real essence of the independence. And my fear is something similar is happening to the carnival with the contemporary almost 90%, and I can say that without any doubt. I've covered carnival for over almost 20 years now on DBS Radio. And covering carnival, there's an excitement with the contemporary. No getting away from that. But then at the expense, we are trying to push things at the expense of others.
Yes.
That's my concern. Why can't we push both together?
Yeah.
And that is where I think we should really understand the value of what we have and what we have in abundance and what we have. That's what we have, Ray.
Yeah.
That's what we have. We do not have the population, we do not have the money, but we have value.
Yeah.
And there's a level of value that we just don't seem to want to understand, to teach our children to understand. So the last few years, the only understanding to be naked is carnival. But that is not carnival. That's not the only aspect of carnival.
Yeah.
To be naked cannot be carnival when we know of several variations of our carnival, and our sister island Grenada has been able to successfully do it. And that's my concern, is we doing to independence, because the season is not World Creole Music Festival, like we all know. The season is independence, that very little. We talk it. We wear. Do we speak the language? Do we take part in the cultural gala like we used to, which was a major fixture? Do we go to the various quarterfinals and the various exhibitions we have around the country? Do we?
Heritage Day.
Heritage Day.
How many of us go to Heritage Day?
If we go to Heritage Day, what do we expect to get? Are we getting it? Are we not just, are we diluting the value of this riches God has given to us for the fast food and talking about things have to evolve? Are we closing our eyes to the evolution, or is it just accepting nous presque mort déjà, nous vieux, and nous quitter ces jeunes moun fait ça yo vle? Because that is the feeling I'm getting.
Yes.
And when I speak about it, I get passionate, mainly because I'm seeing it in broad daylight. Do not forget, I was in the sound system era, which you just kind of skipped over, Dr. Honeychurch.
Yes.
After the still band, there was the sound system era.
That's right.
And then the bouillon era.
I have a photograph.
Uh-huh.
I have a photograph of a little unit, a sound
Maybe what
system,
call it, man?
on top of a pickup
Yeah.
in 1970 Carnival.
Oh, not us.
And that was the beginning
Of sound
that.
system.
of sound
Sound
system.
system.
So you still had your musical bands and your, brass and swinging stars and all that kind of stuff. But this photograph in Windsor Park, in fact, I should put it on, on a Facebook or something.
Yes.
Because you
That
have
was
this
1970.
dinky little thing, 1970 Carnival, with a few guitars and a song system.
And a band was actually playing.
And a band was playing,
Wow.
but they also had some kind of recordings, and they would play that. So it was kind of the technological beginning of it. But these things then affect other things, and it changes. But I just want to say one thing, that, Wadix, you had talked about it a little while ago, and we need to focus on it, is one thing that people overseas who come here for Carnival talk about is the spirit of the Dominica people.
Yeah.
And the hospitality and the jokes and, being friendly without even knowing the person and developing a, relationship with them, a rapport. And because we have the roads, remember where early Carnival, everything was roso. There was no roads. You couldn't get in a truck and go La Plaine or whatever. So this has changed Carnival too. But also Carnival and Creole Festival has linked in now with the visits to the sites.
Yeah.
The River Bath, the waterfall, Miro Beach, all of these things now
Are we maximizing on this? I'm Dr. Honeychurch.
Well, I think it's happening, even
happening.
if there's no focus.
Yeah.
But it's happening because people are saying, okay, I was running mass this morning, but now I'm going to go and
Glow
take
Show,
a swim, or
yes.
I'm going to Glow Show, I'm going to have something.
Yeah.
And I think they call them fete buses or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Yes. And they're fabulous.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a trend as well.
Absolutely. But while we examine this, and we have, according to the coordinator, a few editions, because this is important, because we are heading into a direction.
Yeah.
And there are not very many Lennox, Honeychurch, and Raymond Lawrence, and Anita Bully.
We're in the departure lounge.
I must say there's a father. But this is important. Why? Because we experience what it is, so we know.
Yeah.
Nothing better than the proof of the pudding.
Yeah.
Now we are seeing a departure, and we're not sure if who are presently they understand the whole history, the foundation of what we're trying to get. Because if you want tourists to remember Dominica, you have to try to remember Dominica with its values.
Yeah.
To take from Dominica something similar they can get from Barbados and Grenada, to me, you're not getting the real value of Dominica. And the same way as, let me talk about Grenada, first thing I come to mind is jab jab. We talk about the real mass. We saying sensei,
Sensei.
but we're not
Sensei.
seeing sensei. I would like to see one of those
Mm-hmm.
500 sensei in a band.
Yes.
Different dimensions,
And that's
different.
where the investment
That's where the
comes
investment
in.
comes in.
The
I would be
investment.
happy with 100.
That is one with all the contemporary other bands, and the other bands come
Yeah.
with the Pulse and the
Yeah.
Amnesias. Okay, but at
Yes.
least a sensei band.
Yeah.
Just try to imagine 500
Yeah.
strong with the rope, with the paper now,
Yeah,
the sac
chips,
mayol and
yeah,
different
everything,
dimensions.
yeah.
Because I saw some real colorful sensei in Grand Bay Carnivals
Yeah,
last year,
yeah.
this year.
Yeah.
The multicolor and the liberation
Yeah,
colors.
and they using that shiny material now.
Shiny material now.
Yes, yes.
And there's a kind of silhouette sort of material.
Yeah,
I noticed they use it now in
Yeah.
Sensei, which seems to be much more light.
yeah.
It's lighter than
It's lighter. Yes,
and
it's much
easier.
lighter and cooler too.
and cooler.
And that is why the Alwyn Woolley Foundation had done this workshop to bring in people to look at the costume and see how you can make it lighter and cooler. And they have come up with a way to make it, and it's still very big and with movement.
Finally, I want to thank you guys for what you have done for Dominica, and I really hope that the authorities realize how important you are to Dominica and continue to be, and utilize some of your expertise to keep what that is valuable for us. I'm really hoping and praying that whoever it is, from the government to the ministries to the DDAs, can be bold enough to realize we have some gems. And I call you guys great Dominicans because I know and understand the value. You live among us, you are our living ancestors, and utilize some of that. When you're gone, it's just flowers and remembrance.
Yeah.
But you are alive. We are going for a path, we're going through a phase, but we can, get a good balance. Where I truly believe with the advent of what Bouillon is doing, Dominica can really become the
Yes.
number one
Yes.
in the world. I'm talking about the world,
Yeah.
With what we have seen Bouillon music doing. If we just bring up the traditional to at least half of the kind of interest we give into the contemporary, I don't think no way the world can touch us. That's what I believe.
Yeah,
But we are trying to bring up one at the expense of
the
another.
other.
And I think, we need to kind of balance it off. Final words from you, Hotel Doctor, then Ray, and then the coordinator. I hope you guys can join us again. I give it a whole month of us to discuss. A whole month. If we have to do some online, we have to do some online, but I did that discussion. I don't want to wait for Carnival to have that discussion.
Yeah.
I want us to do it now so we can prepare for a better Carnival. And let's hope that some people can get some good advice and information. So, Dr. Odejudge?
No, it's just that I'm not perturbed too much because I know we've been through these various phases. My first costume building was in 1969, and we had, as I mentioned, discussions in 1971 about how could we make Carnival better. And of course, as we talked about, the changes in technology, the changes in attitudes, the changes in costumes. So it comes and it goes, it rises and falls. So I'm still optimistic that as a result of these efforts that you're making and others, we can enhance it and create moments that people are going to be encouraged once again to participate.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Good.
Ray?
Yes, so then a couple of things that we mentioned, avoiding the clashes with the standard shows, for instance, during Carnival. Try not to schedule whoever is scheduling shows on the nights of the standard. Preparation and planning for Carnival is very important, and that's where the investment comes in. I will continue to emphasize investment so that as soon as one Carnival is over, you start planning the other one, and you're investing, moving from 3 or 4 sensei groups to 10 sensei groups. You have a goal with the schools, with the sensei, with the Lapo Cabot. So every year you see an increase in participation. Dominica can start to think about a carnival office.
Yes.
In Trinidad, they have a carnival. Our carnival is not as big as, but in Trinidad, there's a carnival development office that is, all they do is carnival.
Yeah.
All year round. That is all they focus on. We don't have that here. But I'm suggesting at some point we begin to think, even if it's one person or two, a carnival office, so that as soon as one carnival is over, you're already planning for the next year. You're investing, you're starting your training all over the island. in months in advance, so that by the time Carnival comes around, you're more or less ready. And we have to continue to promote both the contemporary, but to invest heavily now in the heritage, in the traditional, both at Carnival time and you mentioned Independence time. Because if we don't continue to invest in the traditional, we're going to lose it eventually. So those are the points I would like to make, and just to encourage Dominica. I mean, things have been happening, but we have to kind of manage the whole development of Dominica, cultural development of Dominica as well. And I want to emphasize investing more in arts and culture in Dominica. And by the way, we need Arawak House of Culture.
Exactly,
So we continue to make the point that we need the Arawak House of Culture urgently, because the groups are in need of a proper theater in which to perform.
Thank you very much, Ray. Editor, the final words are yours, coordinator.
Oh, thank you, Addicts, for this, because we need to start the conversation with everybody involved in Carnival. Think about it. Think of what is yours. How can you make it better? Okay? Open the minds of our children to what we have. Our children know more about Beyonce and whoever the star of the day is than they know about our cultural people, our cultural art forms. We need, I don't know how much of that is in the schools. We need to get that. We need to get to the schools, get in the schools, and try and motivate the schools to come on board and learn about your country, learn about your traditional art forms. Okay, and let's get something going.
Thank you very much, Anita Bully, the wife of the legendary
Thank you.
Bully. Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you very much, Dr. Leonard Holy Church. This was another Creole Heartbeat program. And coming up next, a special flow program. Audio Nation Station, DBS Radio, Part 2 comes up next week, Friday.
For all the wonders you done for us all, spreading the culture all over the world. For all the good things that you done.